If you are a AI or no code automation freelancer or consultant, or you're thinking about going into this space, what I'm going to talk about today is why I highly recommend you try to stay away from hourly rates as much as you can. Do not charge hourly rates for the work that you're doing. And I say this as someone who has worked on many projects at an hourly rate. So let me talk to you a bit about the pros and cons of it and why I'm saying this. So firstly, there are positives to hourly work, charging your time out at an hourly rate. And in what situations is that good? Firstly, if you need cash flow, like ASAP, because if you work 3 hours a day and your hourly rate, say $50 an hour, you're making $150 a day. Times that out by 4 weeks, and you end up at like $6,000 a month. Not a bad living. I think it's like $6,000 a month, or maybe it's less. But anyway, that's not a bad living. Not doing too badly. So that's one positive is cash flow. If you need money, you have an hourly rate, you find clients and you do those hourly work and you're good to go and you're making some cash. And also other situations that it works well in is if you're doing very random bits and pieces of projects. So it's your client doesn't have consistent work, for example, and they just need you to check on things here and there, or you're just monitoring things a little bit each month. It's very like sporadic. Then hourly rates could work. It makes sense. Like, what other model are you really going to charge in that case? You can't really scope out a project every single time, give them a fixed rate every single time for each little piece of work. It just doesn't work. So hourly rate naturally makes the most sense there. And also, again, retainers, if it's very sporadic work that just pops up as is, again, a client is unlikely going to want to pay a retainer each month. Even if it's just a couple of $100, they're unlikely to pay this if they really don't see themselves using it consistently. But everything I just said, they have a counter argument to it, because I would also say, as I've said in other videos, that if you are working on these very sporadic custom projects each time, that's also not a scalable business model anyway. You don't want to end up in that situation. You don't want to be in a situation that you don't know what to charge. You don't know how long a project's going to take. It's a new project every time, and that's why you have to do the research. That's also the hourly charge is a problem of like another problem. The reason you're having to charge hourly is because you also haven't scoped down your work and have a productized service of some sort, like I've spoken about in other videos. But anyway, let me carry on why, again, hourly rates aren't great. So you have the positives of great cash flow for you as a freelancer, but the negatives far outweigh all of the positives, because that's a very one-sided positive so far. There's also a bit of a positive to the client in that they just only pay as they need to use someone. It's literally as things pop up, they pay. It's like pay as you go. Even some APIs have that. Your cell phone data plan sometimes is pay as you go, things like that. So it does work in some cases, but in most cases, there are just so many more negatives. So let me go into those now. So the negatives is, the first very big one is when you think about why a business is buying a product or service in general, any product or service in a business context is because they believe it's going to give them an ROI in some sense. They're going to get a return on that investment. So if they spend $500 on something, they assume they're going to get at least 2x back. It's like maybe 1.5x is good enough, but they're going to want to get a very clear and obvious return on investment. And one of the big problems with hourly work, again, the only reason you might be charging hourly work is because you're not working on a very productized or well-scoped project. Then the client doesn't necessarily know how long the project is going to take, because you don't know how long the project is going to take. So their total expense is unknown. So for example, if they're paying you $75 an hour, that's my current average hourly rate for very like custom, just as needed work. And I don't know how long something's going to take. It could take 10 hours, for example, so that's $750 for the total delivery. They need to make that decision of, is this project going to give me a higher return than $750, for example? But if they don't know how long the project's going to take, because you can't give them a proper answer, that's a very hard position for them to make a decision from, because they just don't have anything to base that decision off of, am I getting a positive return on investment? Again, this does tie back to the model is just wrong. That if you find yourself charging hourly, that's probably because you haven't gone into some type of productized service or productized delivery. But again, I'm just hitting on why hourly rates really aren't the way forward if you really want to scale this and grow this as a business. And speaking of not knowing how long something's going to take, Also, now think about it from your side as a business owner. So if you don't know how long something is going to take and you're charging an hourly rate, the easiest thing to do is to, if you want to get someone to help you on the projects, is you hire them at an hourly rate. So you have a very clear margin there. That's obvious. So if you charge in your client $100 an hour and you've hired someone from somewhere and you're paying them $40 or $50 an hour, you have a clear margin. Great, $50 an hour. But $50 an hour, is that margin really worth the effort of having to manage someone, manage multiple clients? Also, if you hire someone who's maybe not the most efficient, for example, now they're doing more, they're taking longer than necessary to do something that you know could be done quicker, and you have to charge the client for that. Everything becomes a very weird dynamic between you and the client as well. It's like, yes, you're making margin on that, but again, is that margin worth the effort? Firstly, that $50 an hour, is that worth the effort? But also, every single thing you do now, the client is going to start wondering, is this worth it? Like, I just asked them to do this thing for me and it cost me $100. Like, every little thing starts to get questioned. It creates a very not fun dynamic. It's not a constructive, collaborative dynamic as much so as, hey, this is the price you have and this is the solution we're building for you. Let's get it done type of thing. That's a lot more collaborative, and you can work through problems more easily. The communication is more slick. It's more just around, let's build this thing that gets the solution, versus every single little thing is being charged. It makes it very, very odd dynamic. It's not a great relationship. I mean, I've had clients that I've worked for on hourly rates that have worked out great for me in the long run. I mean, we've had the relationship for a long, long time, but it is just very weird. You do start to question every single thing that's being done. It's like, was this little bit of research worth it? Was that little bit of research worth it? Etc. But again, there are cases that charging hourly does work for you and the client, but they're very small situations. And speaking of margins and you growing this as a business, let's say you decide you want to charge hourly rates because you're working on very customized projects, or you don't know how long your project's going to take, so the easiest solution is just to charge hourly. Now you've hired someone, you're paying them 50% of what you're charging the client, so you make a 50% margin. Okay, that's not too bad, not bad. But let's say, again, you want to hit some type of financial goal, so you either need to work more hours, so that's one thing, is you have to work more hours, and obviously that's a finite resource, or you need to charge more to the client. So as you increase your hourly rate to the client, there's going to be a point that they're just like, this is crazy. You can't be charging me $300-$400 an hour type of thing. I mean, there are situations like that, but finding those clients, it takes work, and you have to find those clients sustainably, and they have to turn into long-term relationships. You have to find multiple of these clients at that very, very high hourly rate. That's tricky. Versus you have some type of productized service that you eventually get to, I've spoken about in other videos, and you're charging $5,000 to $10,000 for that delivery. That's a much easier sell than finding a client who will pay you $300 to $400 an hour, and then you paying your team hourly rates as well, etc., etc. So there's a lot of these pros and cons, as I mentioned, but definitely more cons, especially as a business owner. It's like, yeah, you get the cash flow, but you have all those negative dynamics. It makes it harder to scale the business. You're gonna naturally hit a cap on how much you can earn, and the amount of work you have to keep going through to find those clients and find these big ticket clients who can sustain that level of rate. It's just not worth it. So if you find yourself doing hourly work, sure, it works if you just need to get some cash in, as I was saying. And it can work for the short term as well, especially if you're just getting started. But as I've discussed in longer videos, you ideally want to get to some type of productized service or very well scoped system that you're delivering roughly on the same every time. And that's going to naturally get you away from hourly rates, because if you have that system, you know roughly how long it's going to take after you've built it 2 or 3 times. Then you know how much you could pay someone to do the delivery of it. You know your margins. Your client knows what they're paying upfront. They're just making a straight up return on investment calculation from the get-go. And just everything's so much better. It's so much more scalable as a business. I hope you found that helpful. Again, these are just my learnings and realizations from working in the space for a couple of years. Worked with 100+ businesses at this point, some small, some big, widespread of projects and clients and industries. And again, hourly work can be helpful at the start if you want to just get cash flow in your pocket. And it can help for very random bespoke projects and things like that. And it's very ad hoc, just things pop up. But ultimately, this is all solved by moving towards a productized service or delivery of some sort in AI or no-code automation. And again, the reason is because it makes it easier to hire. Your margins are much more clear. The margins are going to be better. You're not creating this weird dynamic between you and the client of the more you work, the more they're spending, then the return on investment is not very clear. There's just so much wrong with charging hourly rates. So try to get away from it as soon as you can if you are doing it. And I definitely don't recommend it for the long run.